I'm happy to be joined now by Todd Buchholz, and Todd had served for a time as an advisor to President Bush 41, and boy, what a day. What was your observation of what we've all watched here over the last 2.5 hours or so?
Well, this was a special man. This was a man with incredible courage. Look, he loved his country. He adored his family. He did what he thought was right. What else can you ask of a man?
And what a life.
He reminds me, my father was a little bit younger than George Bush, but my father at age 17 enlisted in the Navy to fight the Japanese in the Pacific. And when I learned about that, I thought, wow, my father did something special. But it turned out that's what that generation did. George Bush did it. Bob Dole did it. Alvin Buchholz, my father, did it. It was part of what Tom Brokaw called the greatest generation. There was something about devotion and about giving, and I don't know that I've seen a more emotional moment or a photograph that captured so much of American history than the photograph of Bob Dole standing up to salute his former colleague, his former rival, his fellow soldier. So it's been an extraordinary week that has said all sorts of good things about American history and American character.
Yeah, the moment with Senator Dole at the Capitol yesterday as he remembered President Bush was remarkable. I think, you know, if you didn't have or feel any emotion as you watch that, I mean, you're probably not capable of it. Same goes for that eulogy, I think, that was delivered by President Bush 43, talking about his father. I was thinking throughout as he was speaking, I don't know how he's holding himself together. And then at the end, you know, the tears did flow. But that was something else as he weaved in and out personal stories and also the remembrances of a president, which, you know, speaks, Todd, right to how unique this family was. It's a moment. There have only been two father-son combinations that have served as president. Of course, none of us remember the Adams combination, but we do remember this one, and that's something we've never, you know, seen in our lifetime, and probably, you know, the odds are probably never will again. A father or son eulogizing his father, both having served as president. That was really something else. What did you think of it?
Well, of course it's extraordinary and it's exceptional, as you say, Connell, except for the Adamses. But what is even more exceptional is they could do it and be good people. That is, sure, I can imagine sometime in the future one conniving president followed by another conniving son, and that's the story of much of world history in other countries. But these are good and decent people. Now, you know, there are those who could argue vociferously against what George Herbert Walker Bush did in the Oval Office, or decisions George W. Bush made, but no one disputes that these are people who love their country, and it says something about the American people that we, and in the case of Texans, we elected individuals who could show decency and be decent people down deep.
Yeah,
that we haven't really, we're not a country that's fallen for charlatans. At least it seems that's the case.
You know, I was watching President Bush 43 today, and the words were, you know, memorable, of course, but also kind of the mannerisms and the actions, the double tap on the casket as he walked down after delivering that eulogy. And I don't know if you've seen this, Todd, but it's all over the internet now. It appeared as if, when President Bush arrived for the funeral of his father, and he was walking down the aisle, and he saw President Trump and President Obama were sitting at the end of the aisle. He reached over even today, and as he did good-naturedly at Senator McCain's funeral, looked like he passed the former First Lady Michelle Obama, who he's become friendly with, a piece of candy or a mint or something like that, and there was a smile between all of them, which was was kind of a funny moment, kind of a lighthearted moment as well.
Well, and of course it's become almost legendary, the close bonds that were forged between Bill Clinton and both George Herbert Walker Bush and George W. Bush himself. And George W. Bush today refer to his brothers from another mother.
Yes.
So that's and that's something about the family. I have to tell you, the first time I'd met George W. Bush when I was serving in the White House for his father, but the first time I had a serious conversation with him was when he was going to be thinking of running for president. And I was asked to come to the governor's mansion in Austin to give a briefing on some economic issues. Mm-hmm. And I walked into his office, and, he stood up, said hello. And the first thing he did was stand up and ask me how I took my coffee. And then he made the coffee himself. And I thought, this is George Herbert Walker Bush's son. This is not someone, who puts on airs and someone who's used to commanding people around. When George Herbert Walker Bush was vice president, he kept his own schedule. I think the first time he ever actively used a scheduler and a secretary was when he got elected president, because he could no longer handle all those sorts of things. And I'll tell you, Connell, if that were back in the era of, Outlook and other electronic devices, he probably would have still done it on his own.
Yeah, probably. It's funny, I guess maybe it's, not a great commentary about politics or Washington that, people who are just good people are kind of remembered that way as being almost unique. But one of the lines to that point, the lines of the day, so to speak, delivered by the former senator from Wyoming, Alan Simpson, who's a very, very funny guy for those who have met or interviewed him over the years. He said, "Those who travel the high road of humility in Washington are not bothered by heavy traffic," which was a great line.
That was a great line.
Thank you, Todd, by the way. Thanks so much for calling in today. We appreciate it. We'll talk to you again soon.
All right. Bye-bye now.
Todd Buchholz.